Okay, welcome to the first of my video series on the topic of genetics and evolution. So this will be the third topic that we'll be doing for Year 10. And so let me get started. Okay, Unit 3, genetics and evolution. Okay, this will basically take place over the whole term. So it'll be about 9 weeks and approximately for 5 hours per week, so 5 lessons a week. This may change depending on things like public holidays and whatnot. So let me start off with a prelude. So a prelude is like an introduction. Okay. So the topic's going to be about genetics, right? So genetics basically determines the fate of living organisms, as I'm sure you know. So genetics determines fate of living organisms or living things. Okay, just a fancy way of saying living things. Okay, so basically scientists have been studying how diversity of life came to be, by studying ancestors through evolution and natural selection. And also they've been trying to work out how to use genetics basically to make things better, like fruit, right? So scientists have been studying how diversity of life came to be. Okay, and also how we can use genetics to make things better. Okay, this is called genetic engineering, and I'll talk about that in subsequent videos. But basically, genetics is the scientific study of inherited variation, okay? How we inherit things from our parents and turn out to have different qualities, okay? So genetics is the big idea. Genetics, scientific study of inherited variation. That's the big picture. Okay, so that was a very quick introduction to genetics, what it is. Let me now talk about DNA, genes, and chromosomes. So this is the first heading of the topic. So DNA, genes, and chromosomes. Okay, I'm sure you've heard of these terms, and I'll explain them. I'll explain what they are for those of you that don't know. Okay, so DNA. I'll start off with that. It's referred to as the molecule of life. Okay, as you'll see in many texts and on the internet, molecule of life, and that's not an understatement. It really is. It's basically found in all living things. Found in all living things. Okay, basically acts as a type of chemical code. Okay, that contains instructions or genes for how the body and different parts of the body grow, develop, etc. So acts as type of chemical code that contains instructions. Okay, and these instructions are called genes. Okay, so DNA is basically the life instructions of the cell. DNA is life instructions of the cell. Okay, it's a list basically. Okay, so that's DNA. I'll also be talking about DNA in subsequent videos, but I also just wanted to mention that this molecule is called a double helix. Okay, so called double helix. Now, what does this mean? Okay. A double helix is basically when you have two strands, okay, so two lines of something, and then you twist them together, okay, twist those two lines and you get something like this. This is called a helix, if I can draw it. Okay, that's a helix, double helix. Okay, for DNA, and I'll talk about this in another video, these two uprights are made of a chain of alternating sugar and phosphate units. Okay, think of it as a ladder. Okay, the ladder rings. The ladder. The rungs. Sorry. So I'll write this down actually. So chain of alternating sugar and phosphate units. I also want to mention this unit, there's a lot of definitions, okay, being biology, there's a lot of stuff to remember. So please make sure you know stuff before moving on to the next video, okay? So pause this video if you have to, take it in, or you can rewind, just absorb it basically, okay? There's a lot of definitions. That's how biology is, I guess, okay? So you've got two chains of alternating sugar and phosphate units, okay? So think of them as little blocks, right? Alternating, so sugar, phosphate, dot, 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 dot. Okay. The rungs, so this bit of the ladder, right, things that go across, the rungs, okay, pairs of molecules containing bases, okay, base pairs. Okay, what are base pairs? So base pairs are types of different chemicals, okay? So they join together, think of them as jigsaw, pieces of the jigsaw, they join together, they clasp on together. Okay, there's two of them and they join. Okay, I'm not going to talk a lot about that now. Talk about that in the next video, but that's basically what DNA is. It's a double helix that looks like a twisted ladder. Now, I've got a good analogy here. So if you've got the younger siblings at home, you could steal, or I mean, you can borrow some Lego off them. It's a really great conceptual model to have of DNA. Okay, so let me take it apart first to explain what this is about. Okay, so take two different colors of Lego, pieces of Lego. Can be big or small, doesn't matter. Let's say the white represents the sugar, yellow represents the phosphate. Okay, so connecting them together, I get an alternating chain. Okay, imagine I don't have a lot of these Legos. I had to actually go out and buy these from the shops. Imagine this goes on for a long time, right? But I've got here a little chunk. Think of a chunk, just a piece of the DNA. So sugar, phosphate, sugar. I've got another one here. Okay, think of this as a ladder. Right, the two uprights of the ladder. Now to join the ladder, I need what I call bases. Okay, these are base pairs, and I join them together. So this could be, think of this as a chemical. This is another chemical. Join them together, I get a pair, right? Think of your pair of shoes. You need a pair. You need two, right? You need two shoes to make a pair, not one. So think of this as part of that. Oops. As part of this double helix. Okay. So that's a piece of DNA. Okay. So that's DNA. I now want to talk about genes. Okay. So genes. Here we go. Number 2. Okay. Genes are basically segments of DNA. Okay, they're a piece of DNA. Segments of DNA. Okay. And it basically tells the cell how to make a certain protein, all right? So it tells cell how to make a certain protein. Okay, it's an instruction, think of it that way. So they're parts of DNA, okay? So if I have a piece of DNA here, a gene would be sort of that bit here. Okay, so it's only a part of it. So that's a gene. Now, number 3, chromosomes. Chromosomes are basically long, thin, thread-like structures that are found in the nuclei of all cells, okay? They contain a nucleus, right? So long, thin, thread-like structures found in nuclei of cells. Obviously, the cells have to have a nucleus, with a nucleus. Okay, so if you remember, let me go back to cells. Okay, basically one more thing. So chromosomes are basically made out of DNA and protein. Made of DNA and protein. Okay, each cell, this is very important, each cell in the human body contains 46 chromosomes. Okay, that's the magic number. Make sure you memorize that number. Okay, so each cell in human body has 46 chromosomes. That's a very important number that you should memorize if you can. 46. Okay, and they're arranged also in 23 pairs. So if you forget 23, just think of 46 and divide it by 2. So arranged in 23 pairs. Okay, and I'll explain that in upcoming videos. Okay. But the only exceptions, I should mention as well, the only exceptions, so things that don't have chromosomes, are gametes, which are the sex cells, and red blood cells. So only exceptions are gametes. Okay, gametes is just a fancy term for sex cells. Okay, sex cells. Okay, example would be the sperm and egg cells. Okay, and red blood cells. Okay, they don't contain any chromosomes. Let me draw a picture of basically a summary of genes, chromosomes, and DNA just to break it down for you if you're still struggling to conceptually understand what's going on. Okay. So remember what cells look like? They're basically blobs, right? A big blob. That's a cell. Now, cells have a nucleus, right? So they've got a wall at the on the edges. So they've got a wall on the border. They've got a nucleus, right? Nucleus. Think of a nucleus as in an atom, right? It's at the center. So same thing here in the cell. It's at the center. So that's a cell. That's the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, right, are these X's. Okay, these X's are called chromosomes. Okay, chromosomes look like X's. Okay. Now, if you zoom into a chromosome, like part of a chromosome, you'll find that it's made of DNA. Excuse my terrible illustration. Not a good artist. Okay, DNA. Okay. Remember, what's a segment of DNA? It's a gene, right? So that here, say, is a gene. And that's pretty much what you need to know for this lesson. So zooming into a cell, so let's say my hand here, right? You know that your hand's made of cells, right? Skin cells. Zooming in, I get an individual cell. Zoom into the nucleus, I see X's. These X's are chromosomes, right? Zooming into the chromosomes, I get DNA. And a chunk of DNA is called a gene. Okay. Now, it's also worth mentioning that each chromosome consists of many genes, okay, as you'd expect along its length, and each chromosome can have over 100 genes. So each chromosome can have over 100 genes. Okay, and you'd expect that, okay, because DNA is so small and it's only a chunk. So looking at a chunk of a chromosome, you can see, right, DNA, and there's a lot of genes, obviously. Okay, and they usually occur in matched pairs. So chromosomes, I should mention that as well, usually occur in matched pairs, okay? So they come in pairs. So it's also worth mentioning that organisms, okay, different organisms have different numbers of chromosomes in each cell, okay? So different organisms have different number chromosomes in each cell. Okay, example, donkeys have 62 chromosomes, okay? Chimps have 48, and believe it or not, potatoes actually have 48. So the same number of chromosomes as chimps. There's diversity in life. So that's this lesson. So to summarize, DNA, genes, and chromosomes. DNA is the molecule of life. It's basically the life instructions of a cell. It's a double helix made up of alternating chains of alternating sugar and phosphate units. Chromosomes are basically made out of DNA and protein, and genes are basically segments of DNA.